Hello everyone, so I'm very happy to be here today with you to introduce you a little bit about how the COVID-19 pandemic changed a lot for the people on their vision of Shanghai, but also for the tourism industry. But first, let me present a little bit more myself. So as it was just said, I was born in a very little town in France, and when I was in middle school, I had the chance to start learning Chinese. And since then, I really felt in love with China and with the Chinese language. So I had the idea that I wanted to go to China to maybe study or work, but I had no idea at that time what to really do. But now what I'm doing is this. So in 2020, in March 2020, I started a company called Arcade Experiences. And as it was also just said, we're doing a lot of different activities to help people understand better Shanghai's history, but in a fun way. But from the little girl in middle school to this, of course, a lot of changes happened. So let's go back a little bit in the past so I can introduce you to all the different changes that make me be who I am now. Okay, not that far. Oh, better. Okay, so now we are almost 4 years before in 2019. And at that time, I was just graduated from university. So I had a master's degree in tourism management in Ningbo University. And I also graduated from another master in France, also on tourism management. So I was 23 years old. Very young, very happy. I just majored graduated in a major that I really like. And I was offered a very cool job in Shanghai. So everything was super fun and I was super happy. So right after that, in October 2019, I came back to Shanghai and I started the ideal job for me. So basically, I was doing bike tours in the city for international tourists. Tourists from like a lot of different countries, the US or many countries in Europe or in Asia. And we were taking them on a bike all around the city to discover the cool things of Shanghai. And the job I was offered in that company was to be trained for 6 months and then to become the general manager of the company. So at 23 years old, that was really cool. And I was so happy with that job. I had a team of about 10 people. I was like half outdoor, half at the office. That was really the ideal position for me. But wait, I started this job in October 2019, and I was supposed to be trained for 6 months and then be kind of the boss of the company. But October, November, December, January, and then COVID. So I didn't really get into my new position of general manager because COVID arrived before all that happened. So in January 2019, COVID started to become something really serious in our lives. We started to be afraid, we started to wear masks. And for me, I just started to be really afraid for the company I was working for my future position, for my colleagues, and also for the whole tourism industry. Because the Chinese borders were just closed down. So no tourists could come again, for that time. And for me, in my job position, it meant that I was just taking cancellations every day. I saw my coworkers losing their job. I helped to close the company, and then I lost my own job. So now we are in March 2020. I have no job. I'm in Shanghai. My visa is about to expire. And I have to find a solution because I really want to work. I really want to do stuff. So at that time, I had just 4 options that I could see in front of me. So the first option was just to try to find a new job in the tourism industry because that was the industry I liked. But of course, with the COVID pandemic, that was almost impossible. Either for the national tourism within China or also for the international tourism. So that was not even an option. Second idea was to try to find a new industry to work in, or maybe start new studies in a different industry. But for me, it was not really interesting as well because I really liked tourism and I wanted to do the thing I like. So then I thought about a third option, which was not good as well, which was to go back to France. Because, well, if you don't have visa, of course, you need to go back to your country. But for me, it will be a big failure. Because since I was almost 12 years old, my dream was to go to China and to live in China. So I didn't choose that option either, even if my mom would be very happy. So I chose the fourth option. The fourth option was to start my own business. And at that time, when I announced that to my friends, to my family, well, I was turning crazy. Because, well, we are in a pandemic, nobody can travel, and I was talking about I'm going to open a company doing tours and walks in Shanghai for people to discover it. But that's the option that I chose at that time. So in April 2020, I started Arcade Experiences. And with the previous experience I had doing bike tours for tourists in Shanghai, I really wanted to continue doing that, but I had a few problems, like there's no tourists anymore, so what should I do? At that time, I thought that I still want people to learn more about Shanghai, which is an amazing city, and especially about the history of Shanghai. So I decided still to do some tours and walks in Shanghai regarding the history of it. And, well, I could only find local people to participate in my activities. So by local people, I mean, well, all the people living in Shanghai, including, of course, Chinese people, foreigners living in Shanghai. So that was a big challenge for me. Because there's a huge difference between the local people and the tourists in terms of the perception of the city. Before, I used to do only tours for tourists, and these people, they will come once, and then they will go, and new one will come, and it will be always like this. So when the tourists come, they want to see some classic, maybe the Bund or Yu Garden, and they don't know that much about the history of Shanghai, so you need to share with them some very general knowledge. But for the local people, most of them, they have lived for years in Shanghai. Some of them were even born in Shanghai. So, of course, they don't want you to take them to the Bund or to some places they went by themselves for like a couple of times. So you also need to share some secrets, some things that they cannot find by themselves. So for me, it was a switch to do between, like, I would say, general knowledge and places to some more precise and secret things. So it was also the opportunity for me to actually rediscover Shanghai. Even if I arrived in Shanghai in 2015, so I already spent 4 years in Shanghai at that time. But actually, I was always very busy with my previous job. And, well, you know, when you're busy doing something, you don't really have time to look around and to change stuff, actually. So at that time, well, I was not very busy. I was just starting my company. I had no clients at the moment. So I really took time to rediscover the city, try to find the hidden gems, the secrets, and try to find a good way to share it with the people. But then came another problem. I started to have a few tours, a few walks that were working quite well with word of mouth and some promotion on WeChat. But then, because we were only doing people like locally, well, if someone come to my tour and he enjoyed it, then he wants to have something more. He wants to come to another one maybe. But before, when I used to do international tourism, well, I told you the people were coming and going and coming, and they will never come again, or probably never. So for the local people, if you want to keep them and make sure they will come back, you need to have a huge offer. They need to have the tour number 2, number 3, number 4, and extra. And at that time, we also had no idea for how long it will last. So we had to create new tours like every month. From just one tour, we had like more than 20 tours. And always think about what would be the next secret, what would be the next thing to find that nobody heard about. That was such a huge challenge. And there was also some perception in the local community that we had to kind of broke. Because a lot of people that used to live in Shanghai in the past before the pandemic, they will think that maybe Shanghai has not so much to offer. Because many people that used to have some time and money for holidays before the pandemic, most of the people, they will choose to go to a different place. So they will go to another province in China, or they will go to another country. But with the pandemic, they had no choice than like stay in Shanghai. And some of them will think, well, Shanghai has nothing to see. I mean, I'm living in Shanghai for my entire life. I don't know what to see in this city. And some people also think that Shanghai has not a very long history, not like cities like Xi'an or Beijing with the Forbidden City or this kind of things. But yes, we don't have the Forbidden City in Shanghai, but we have the Shikumen houses, we have the Old City, we have Yu Garden, we have a lot to see. And Shanghai has so many things to offer to the people. And there was also another perception that I had to broke. It was the impression or the perception the people used to have about tours or city walks. Many people used to think that in their own city, in the city they're living in, they don't need a guide to take them to go and see the things. They can just go by themselves. But actually, of course, you can go by yourself, but you will probably miss some information and miss some details. So that's why I still think it's important to go with a tour. But because the people had this perception of tours, we also had to make it look a little bit smoother, like a very small group, very friendly, to pay attention to details, and don't make it like a business thing, or we're just making money out of it, but we are really trying to take people like if they're my friends or my family. Just as if my parents were visiting me in Shanghai, I will show them what I think is interesting and what I think worth it. And after that, we had quite a couple of tours in the city, and it was working quite well. But, you know, the pandemic was continuing, and we had no idea when it will stop. In September 2020, I could feel that the people were starting to get bored in Shanghai, because it was almost 6 months since the beginning of the pandemic, and we had no idea for how long it will last. So we could feel that even if the people enjoyed our city walks, it was maybe not the best thing for all the clients we could have, especially for some people with kids or teenagers. They might think it's a bit boring to go on a historic tour. So we decided to create a new concept called the mystery hunt. And this concept is kind of a mix between a scavenger hunt and an escape game, but outdoor. So basically, there is a mystery to solve related to Shanghai's history in the 1920s, 1930s. And you have to follow a detective in the streets and go to find some actors on the way that are wearing like old costumes. And you have to interact with them, you have to steal things from them, a lot of things like that, to solve the mystery and make sure like Shanghai history will be safe. And this idea, actually, I had it for years. But the problem is, in my previous company, like in the company I was working for before, we had no time to develop new ideas because we were too busy doing always the same things. We had actually no time for change because we were doing the routine. So this time, well, I had time to change because like nobody was right anymore. Like it was an entire global pandemic. So I decided to develop that idea myself for my own company and just like, let's just try. If it works, it works. If not, that's not a big matter. And actually it worked quite well. So we developed one mystery hunt and then another one. And now we have different scenarios for kids, for adults, for corporates. So that was actually the right time to change stuff and to create new products. But then a new problem happened. So we were in 2020, creation of the new product, Mystery Hunt. Then 2021 was quite good. We were keeping on developing new products, having new clients. And it was all good until the lockdown in 2022 in Shanghai. So at that time, of course, it was hard for everyone in Shanghai. For us, and I mean for my company and for the travel industry in general, well, it just meant that we had to stop everything because we could not go on the street to do tours anymore. So for me, in my personal life, I was actually quite busy because I was helping as a volunteer in my community, but my job life was just totally stopped. So I could decide just to wait and see and just try to wait for the lockdown to stop. But of course I had financial pressure because I had employees to pay, I had the rent of the office to pay. So I also wanted to try to do things during that lockdown and try to see how we can try new things and maybe change old things that we used to do. So at that time the only thing we could do was, well, online activities. So we started to develop some online products, online mystery hunts, online quizzes, games, a lot of things related to Shanghai's history. And at that time, we were only doing it for the people who were under lockdown in Shanghai. And it was working quite well because people were bored at home. But actually, right after the lockdown, we realized that we could do that for a lot of people in China and also in other countries. So until now, we're still doing these activities that we prepared during the lockdown for some companies that are in different countries or remote workers. So we still do this, even if at that time we saw it was just a bandage during the lockdown, but actually we could use it again after it. So you can see that from this the first picture to, well, now 2023, I went through a lot of changes. And actually, if you go back to the person in 2019 and you tell her that what will happen and how it will change, I cannot trust that. Mostly because I was very young, I was 23 years old. I thought that I would have maybe a career in tourism in different big companies. I want to learn from the others, and maybe in 10 years I wanted to start my own business. But actually, COVID-19 helped me to start all this thing faster. And now I don't really regret it. Even if it was not all perfect, of course, we had some ups and downs during these 3 years. But actually, where we are now, I think it's where I should be maybe 10 years after if there was not the COVID pandemic. So even if sometimes stuff like a pandemic, this kind of big change that we cannot really control, they can actually push us to choose the way we want things to change. So in the future, if you are confronted to a difficult situation or a big change, actually you should try to dare to change the things, dare to be yourself, and dare to change. Thank you.